This afternoon's session will be hearing from Laureate Professor Jenny Gore, who's going to give us an overview of the Strengthening Induction project and share some of the recent findings with all of us, as well as providing a brief overview of quality teaching rounds and outlining how schools can be involved in the project. So we are presenting from a Wabakal country here at the Callaghan campus of the University of Newcastle. It's a beautiful bushland campus that we're privileged to come to work to, and we would very much like to pay our respects to Aboriginal elders past, present and emerging, and to acknowledge that learning has been taking place for many, many thousands of years, and we're privileged to continue that learning process. So I am going to pass over to Laureate Professor Jenny Gore now, and please bear in mind that at the end of the session there will be an opportunity for any questions that you can put to Jenny either in the chat or and by unmuting yourself. So please jot down any questions that pop up in your head so that you can ask them at the end. But thank you so much, Jenny. Over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. And I think, the title that we've given to this session of Supporting Teachers from the Start really just highlights what the project's all about. It's making sure that teachers get that great introduction, which sets them up for successful careers. And we know that those first few years can make a real difference. The research team of people involved in this project is listed at the bottom, and all of our fabulous support staff listed below that. But that's just really to acknowledge my team and the great role they play. But we know that induction in Australia has been an issue for government since at least the 1970s. The first major report into teaching in the 1980s had a whole section on just how important induction is. Since then, there was a lot of research, particularly in the 1990s and early 2000s, that looked into the effects of induction. And that work pretty much found that effective induction is associated with reduced attrition, which particularly in this context with the teacher shortage, we know is a huge issue. Increased job satisfaction, which again contributes to retention. And really importantly, those positive effects on student achievement, because ultimately that's what our teaching's for. So we know that good induction can have those positive effects, but it really depends a lot on the number of supports that are provided for early career teachers and the kinds of support. Although induction is actually a state responsibility, the national guidelines for induction were released by AITSL, our Australian Institute for Teaching and School Leadership, in 2016, and they were updated in 2023. So anyone who sort of wants to look at the AITSL position on induction can have a look on their website. But they really saw induction as designed to support that transition from graduate status to proficient status, typically over a 2-year period. And we know that a lot of induction today is focused on accreditation and getting through that transition phase. They talk about 5 elements to effective induction: mentoring, professional practices. I personally prefer to use professional practice. I can talk more about that later. Workplace and community orientation, because there is that getting to know the school and the community. Relationships with students, with colleagues are, of course, terribly important. And we know that wellbeing has a really important role to play as well in that effective induction phase. Some of the challenges we face, though, is the kind of endless complaints about the quality of initial teacher education as a problem for beginning teachers, and also the quality of graduates that people say we're just not getting good teachers anymore. That's actually a disputable claim. There's research that we've done that's actually found that the quality of teaching, and of course it always depends on how you measure these things, but the quality of teaching is actually no different between beginning and experienced teachers when it comes to their classroom practice. We can talk more about that later if you'd like to. We hear a lot about this assumption of poor quality teaching, and our research paper cited there, as well as one by Linda Graham, who's a Queensland academic, have both shown that this assumption, as I said, is false. I think teachers over time get better at a whole lot of things, whether that's, relating to students, organising materials, reporting to parents and families and so on. But when it comes to the quality of their classroom practice, what we see is not a lot of change over time. I think this means that actually we're not doing such a bad job in initial teacher education, although when I say that, teachers often laugh, which maybe means you don't agree, or either that or teachers are not getting a lot of professional development that fundamentally impacts on their teaching. And I think there's some truth to that as well. What I find is that a lot of teachers have professional development on curriculum, assessment, reporting, bullying, cyberbullying, mindfulness, etc., but maybe not quite as much professional development on things that actually have an impact on the way you conduct yourself in the classroom. You excuse me 1 second. It's hideously hot in here all of a sudden. I just need to turn the air conditioner on. 1 minute. All right, that should be better in a second. We also know that there's quite a lot of emphasis in induction on taking care of new teachers and helping them to survive rather than to thrive necessarily. It's like just making it through. We've all been through that process ourselves. I was a secondary physical education teacher in my day, and sometimes it does feel like you're just surviving. The other approach that's often taken is we're fixing beginning teachers, all the things that weren't done in their teacher ed programs. But that often starts with a kind of deficit mindset that says beginning teachers have all these problems that we need to sort out now that they're in the profession. And as I said, the research that a few of us have done now showing that there isn't the huge differences that we necessarily imagine, I think is quite important. And I think, all of us have also seen brilliant beginning teachers, people who seem to have been, the old born not made expression, but people who just seem to be born for this as a role. What we know from the Australian teacher workforce data and from AITSL is that only 55% of early career teachers in 2023 reported that they had any formal induction, and that number has actually declined from 61%. So nearly half of our beginning teachers are reporting that they're not having a formal induction period. And I mean, whether that's accurate or not, if that's how they are seeing that experience of coming into a school, I think that really does matter, regardless of whether it's just that they haven't paid attention, perhaps. We certainly know that that's the case in university classes sometimes. During the same period, the range of supports has also decreased. So you might remember I said before, it's not only the quality of the supports that they receive, but the number of supports. What we find now is that most induction programs really address the bare necessities, an orientation to the school and the allocation of a mentor. And that mentor's role can be really varied. So some people, have regular meetings with their mentors and do collaborative planning. And are observed and given specific feedback, and others, it's kind of someone you go and see if you're having problems. We also know that a lot of beginning teachers don't like to own up to their problems. They don't want to be seen as weak or not fit for the school. When I talk about that access to different kinds of activities, this is a slide from the Australian teacher workforce data. It was looking at teachers in their first 2 years. And as I say, that's the source of it. So in fairly recent years, what you can see, if you go from the top to bottom with each group of horizontal bars, it's 2019 to 2023. So you can see a reduction of induction supports right across the board. Mostly you see orientation and mentoring, the top two. But the number of teachers who are getting an opportunity to observe or be observed by experienced teachers has dropped down to about half. Targeted professional learning, much more limited than it used to be. Internal networking, very limited. Reduction in face-to-face hours, which has often been a given for early career teacher support, has really reduced as well. Opportunities my screen's in the way, opportunities to actually work in structured ways with other new teachers, quite limited. and any follow-up from initial teacher education is even more limited than it ever was, even though it was always quite limited. So I think this kind of data really speaks to just how important it is that we are doing something more to support our early career teachers. And that's where our project comes in. I know some of the schools that are attending today are involved in this project, and I think some of the teachers might have even been through rounds, and very happy to hear from you in a little while. Schools are certainly able to bring more than one group into this project. I'll come back to that. But this is a National Teacher Workforce Action Plan initiative funded now till mid-2027, and it does offer free quality teaching rounds professional development, free because it's funded by the federal government, for 1,600 teachers in groups of 4. And each group of 4 has to include 2 teachers in their first 3 years. We say first 3 years full-time equivalent. So there's a little bit of flexibility there because some people have been working casually or in part-time roles. And then at least one more experienced teacher. So basically it's 2 and 2 or 3 and 1 early career experienced. Having the experienced teachers there, we think they're not the leaders of the group, but it just gives that kind of intergenerational understanding of teaching and can really enrich the kind of experience that our early career teachers are having. So this project really aims to not only improve, obviously, the quality of teaching, but also wellbeing, self-efficacy, morale, and job satisfaction, all of those factors that are actually critical to professional identity. And we know that induction is a time when teachers really do form that sense of themselves. And if it's a positive sense of self, they're more likely to stay. And we also, at the same time, want to support experienced teachers in the role they play in teacher induction. So helping with the mentoring component of that work as well. Sharon Fiman-Nebser years ago said the first years of teaching influence not only whether people remain in teaching, but what kind of teacher they become. If we want schools to produce more powerful learning on the part of students, we have to offer more powerful learning opportunities to teachers. And again, our evidence certainly suggests that that's what this approach can do. So what are we looking for? If you want to get involved or if you want to get another group involved, we need principal consent. Often that comes after you've sent an EOI, but just making contact with our team. I'll come back to those contact details at the end. So we just need the principal to sign a simple consent form. We need consent from the 4 teachers, any group of 4 that's going to be involved. We need the teachers to fill in 2 surveys that take around about 10 minutes, ideally about a week apart. Those 4 teachers then come to a workshop, either face-to-face or online, and they don't all have to come to the same workshop. It can work quite well to release 2 for one and 2 for another workshop, or if that's too hard for your school, you can just send 1 teacher to each of 4 workshops. They then do their rounds in school, and that's usually 4 teachers spending 4 days together. So there is a bit of a cost to schools in creating the conditions for teachers to undertake rounds, but as I will share with you in a minute, the benefits of doing that seem to be absolutely enormous. And then finally, the post-intervention surveys. So after they've done their rounds, those 2 surveys, again, a week apart. Those 4 days that they do the rounds should be roughly a week or 2 apart. It's not 4 days in a row. It's 4 days spread over ideally 4 to 8 weeks. So what do they do when they come together? We developed in 2003 this quality teaching model, which really is a comprehensive model of pedagogy. It doesn't just treat pedagogy as a technical enterprise. It honours the complexity and the realities of classroom life for teachers. The model has these 3 key dimensions, we call them, but 3 key factors: that every lesson, every learning experience should have high intellectual quality. That is, that students are developing a deep understanding of important knowledge. Obviously, that's partly dictated by the curriculum, but it also signals that teachers make really important professional judgments about what's important. What are you going to blend together? What are you going to emphasize? What are you going to skip over because you don't have time or it's not as important for students to develop that deep understanding? Quality learning environment is about making sure that classrooms actually boost student learning. We're pretty good as teachers at making classrooms safe, happy environments. But how do we actually ensure that they're also boosting student learning? Because ultimately that's our job as teachers. And the third dimension, significance, is about connecting what kids are learning in school to their own lives and to the wider world. Because if we can see the point in what we're learning, we're more likely to be engaged. Historically, in education, we've tended to do one of these three at the expense of the others. We've done a lot of hands-on, experiential, significant learning, but the intellectual quality's dropped. Or we've done high intellectual quality, but kids have been too scared to make mistakes because they feel the pressure. What we're saying here is that all three of these dimensions should be in place in every learning experience if we want to get better outcomes for kids. And with each of the dimensions, we have 6 elements where we give, if you like, more specificity to what is meant. So ensuring that students are addressing key concepts, have a chance to show their deep understanding, recognise that knowledge is open to question, engage in higher order thinking, unpack the language they're using, and have opportunities to communicate in rich ways. For example, as the intellectual quality elements, each one of these elements is coded on a 1 to 5 scale. And really importantly, that's to support teacher development. It's not about judgment. The focus is on the teaching practice, not the teacher. We've done a lot of work to make sure that the power dynamics that are kind of inescapable in any kind of social situation, that they are addressed by managing this focus on the teaching, not the teacher. The quality learning environment, as I said, it's not about keeping kids safe and warm and happy only. It is about attending to their learning. We need to be clear on what good looks like. What is good work? We're really good at telling kids what to do. We're not quite as good at telling them what good looks like. And that goes beyond success criteria to some extent. Again, we can talk more about that later. That we have serious engagement in the work, investment in the work, that we're communicating expectations that are high and appropriate, and you know your students better than we ever could. So that's, again, really all of this important teacher judgment. That classrooms are socially supportive, that kids learn routines that ensure that they're regulating their own behaviour, and that we give kids some choice and some control where it's useful to do so. Not every one of these elements has to be present at a high level in every lesson, but each dimension should be present at a high level. And for significance, we talk about connecting with kids' past, making sure that we consider non-dominant forms of cultural knowledge, that we connect things wherever we can, that we make sure our classrooms are inclusive of all the different kinds of students in the classroom, that we connect their learning to the world beyond the classroom. And where possible, we use stories because they make learning rich and exciting. We always realised that having a model wouldn't be enough. We had to have a powerful way of working with the model. And this is where the Quality Teaching Rounds initiative comes from. It basically is this approach to teacher professional development that is really designed to empower teachers to empower each other. And I think it's really important to recognise that what we're doing here is all part of a not-for-profit social enterprise. We're not trying to make money out of this. We're absolutely trying to make a difference for teachers and students. The Quality Teaching Rounds process has these 4 components. Basically, we bring those groups of 4 teachers together to do something that shouldn't be unusual in schools, but actually is. They get to sit together and discuss something they've all read or watched. It can be a TED Talk, a YouTube clip, it can be an academic paper, a news item, it can be anything. But just giving teachers a chance to sit together and begin to share their ideas. And this is really important for the power dynamics as well, because it means they start to build a sense of professional learning community. And they also have common knowledge, some common touch points, because we know teachers have very different backgrounds and experiences. So it's a real community, if you like, bonding part of the session. They then go and watch one member of their group of 4 teach a whole lesson. We always watch whole lessons because we believe it's more respectful of teachers and of the teaching learning process. Of course, there's value in walkthroughs and learning sprints and things for different purposes. But if we're interested in the quality of learning for students, it's often those last 2 or 3 minutes of the lesson where we as teachers tie it all together and the deep learning becomes more apparent. And I also know as a teacher myself, someone can come into the room and you can go, I wish you came in 5 minutes earlier when everything was humming. You've just walked in at this one flat spot, So having that whole lesson observation is critical. Everyone then codes the lesson on 1 to 5 scales using the 18 elements of the quality teaching model. That sounds like a lot. We find when teachers do this for the first time, it takes between 20 and 30 minutes. And thereafter, a lot of them do it in 10, 15 minutes. So even though it sounds challenging, it's actually quite simple. I think the wording of the quality teaching model classroom practice guide, teachers tell us all the time that it's so clearly and so carefully worded that it makes it relatively easy to form those opinions of the appropriate coding for the lesson. Once everyone's coded the lesson, and I should say including the teacher who taught the lesson, so it's not us giving you feedback, it's us watching each other to talk about our pedagogy and how we might enhance our pedagogy. So once they've done that individual coding, they then come together and they share their coding and not only talk about the lesson in detail, but talk about teaching more broadly. If they find that their group work is not having the effects they hoped it would, it's an opportunity for the group to say, well, what can we do in place of these group activities? How do we need to structure our group activities to make sure they're more powerful? And the kinds of responses we get, like Andrea, deputy principal, who I interviewed, said, this is the first time in my career I feel I'm actually teaching students. Until now, I've just been giving them work to do, which is a pretty poignant statement of the difference it made for someone who was clearly a successful teacher, but he now understood teaching in a way that was much more accessible in terms of translating that into practice. We've done a whole lot of research on this approach. So back in 2004, the New South Wales government funded us to look at just what is the quality of pedagogy and achievement in New South Wales government schools. It wasn't an intervention, it was just looking at quality. And overall, we found that quality was okay, but could quite easily be tweaked to make it that much stronger and have, if you like, more satisfied teachers feeling good about their practice and students who were achieving better outcomes, but also more equitable outcomes, which is another of our key concerns here. Second major study, and we've done a whole lot of others, these are just the main ones, was funded by the Australian Research Council, and it was looking at Catholic schools in New South Wales. And this is the study where we first trialled quality teaching rounds. We actually had groups of 8 teachers, and they watched each other on 1 lesson per year, so 8 lessons, and they did that for 3 years. That was pretty unsustainable as a model because most schools don't even have 8 teachers, some of them, and certainly can't release 8 teachers for 8 days. So the ACT Department of Ed came to us and they said, we really like this approach, but if that's the Rolls-Royce model, can we please have a mini minor version? And that's where we first trialled groups of at least 3. And we said, your rounds could be whole day, but if you can do it in half a day, go for it. And that's what's more technically called design experiments. What we found was that teachers basically liked the approach regardless of how they did it. In this project, some of them did faculty-based groups in secondary schools and others did mixed groups, which is actually our norm. We prefer to have your PE teacher sitting with your music teacher, your English teacher and your maths teacher, because the different perspectives you bring to pedagogy are not dependent on the content, but can really enrich teachers' learning, and seeing teachers in different subject areas can be really powerful. Having done that study and found it to be really positive, the New South Wales Department of Education then funded us to do a randomised controlled trial. So RCT, this is where you have matched schools and you give one group the treatment, if you like, in this case, quality teaching rounds, and the other group just does its professional development, whatever's going on in the school. What we found here, we were only looking at the impact on teachers and teaching, is that it had significant effects on the quality of teaching and on teacher morale and sense of recognition, being valued for their work. On the back of that evidence, the Paul Ramsay Foundation, which is a big philanthropic organisation, then funded us with actually $17.2 million, probably one of the, I think, the largest research grant ever given for a single program of work in Australia, to do 4 randomised controlled trials working in across Australia, to see what kinds of impact we could have here on student achievement. Because even though the 2014 study showed powerful effects on teachers, people wanted to say, well, that's great, but what's the impact on students? We need to know that. I'll share a little bit of that data in a second. In 2023, we got the federal funding for this induction project. And in 2024, we actually got another grant from the Paul Ramsay Foundation to look at 20 of the most disadvantaged primary schools and see what kind of impact we could have when this was an ongoing initiative for the school over a few years. What we found from a whole lot of that research, and this is very much a summary, we found significant, like statistically significant, and that's quite important because very few professional development studies show statistically significant improvement. We saw significant improvements for students in both maths and reading. Now, we only tested maths, reading and science, and we dropped science after the first study because primary teachers weren't teaching enough science to actually see a difference. What's also really important here is we weren't teaching teachers how to teach maths or reading. We were providing professional development on pedagogy, and to see that, if you like, what's called a distal relationship between the PD on pedagogy and improvement in maths and reading using progressive achievement tests, standardised tests used across the country and actually elsewhere in the world. That's really exciting because most PD that shows significant effects is what they call a proximal effect. Teach teachers how to teach fractions in maths and kids do better at maths, to some extent, unsurprisingly. And when we say statistically significantly better, we're talking 2 to 3 months ahead at the end of the school year compared to their peers in matched schools. We found these results in both year 3, 4 and 5, 6. We wanted to study year 8 in one of the trials we did, but unfortunately it was in Victoria immediately after COVID, and we just didn't get the numbers to produce significant results. So we do have significant effects in both New South Wales and Queensland. We have significant effects when it's delivered face-to-face and when it's delivered online. Those teachers never came together. They did the 2-day workshop online and they did their rounds online, filming lessons and discussing them online. We found positive effects when I led the workshops as one of the originators, if you like, of the quality teaching model and quality teaching rounds, but also when our advisors, people like Kate, led the workshops. And also we had the University of Queensland conduct an independent trial. So sometimes people say if you research your own stuff, of course you're going to find positive effects. Well, this was a different group researching our stuff, and they actually found 3 months growth for students. We'd only found 2 months. So that was terrific. In terms of effects for teachers, we've seen improvement in the quality of teaching, in teacher morale, in efficacy and confidence, collaboration and collegiality greatly improved, and as a result, real changes in school culture. And what you hear, like this teacher, Susan, was an experienced teacher, and she was put in a group. She was voluntold to be a part of it. And she said they didn't like me and I didn't like them, but it was only on hearsay and reputation, talking about the other people in her PLC. She said, but when I was in the room with them and working with them, I respected them and I learned to trust them and I learned who they really were. So again, you can see not only does this have an effect on how people understand teaching, as Andrew, our deputy, said, but it has a really big effect on how teachers understand one another and how they relate to one another. Why does it work? We've done a lot of analysis of this. We think the shared model of quality teaching is a really significant part of this. It gives teachers a set of concepts and language with which to talk about their practice. As teachers, a lot of what we do is kind of intuitive. Like things work, we do them year after year, but we can't always explain them. And I think that having this language for talking about teaching is really powerful. We also give teachers sustained time for critical analysis of practice. Often, and we know that this is the case in some states at the moment, you might have 1 hour maximum for professional learning time. It's hard to do anything in depth, especially around the quality teaching model, if you only have 1 hour. So just having that time for teachers to be able to really carefully not just reflect on their practice, but critically analyse their practice through the lens of the quality teaching model and the specificity of or fine-grained nature of the 1 to 5 coding. It just leads to really rich conversations. And it also really builds this climate of trust. We've spent a lot of time, as I said, thinking about the power dynamics of groups. And so we really work hard to ensure that this is a positive, safe experience for all teachers involved, and that it helps to build this climate of trust that really supports their learning. So if I talk about the projects that we're asking those of you who are not yet involved to consider becoming involved, and those of you who are might consider bringing in other groups, what we're finding so far, 3 main things: improved retention, improved wellbeing, and improved efficacy. So just to share with you some of those details. In terms of retention, we asked teachers if they had any intention to leave teaching within the next 6 months. A lot of studies ask people about their intention to leave in the next 2 years or whatever, 3 years. But we wanted to know if quality teaching rounds was having an immediate effect. We also know that retention is a much more effective and efficient way to address the teacher shortage than is recruitment. Recruiting teachers, training teachers, getting them into the profession and inducted adequately or ideally well is a time-consuming process. So if we can hang on to the teachers we've got, that's really important. We also know that quality teaching rounds improves both retention and teaching and learning outcomes. So to have those positive impacts, again, signals the value of this approach. So intention to leave within 6 months. Before teachers started the project, 28% indicated on a scale of 0 to 10 some intention to leave. When we asked them after they'd done rounds, only 17% indicated some intention to leave. That's quite a significant drop. And of those who had some intention to leave at the start, 40% of those who said, I'm out of here pretty much, now have 0 intention. And those who are right up the 9 and 10 end of the scale, we called that high or severe intention to leave, 2/3 of those, so around 65%, I think it was, now have no intention to leave. So that result in itself is really significant in terms of hanging on to the teachers we have, which is really important. And here you see Bree, a first-year out teacher, saying before rounds it was so overwhelming, so isolating, that I actually didn't know if the 4 years of uni was worth it. After doing QTR, I'm like, I can actually get there. I love what I do. So you can see that kind of impact on early career teachers. In terms of teacher efficacy, this is a really interesting slide that shows the impact for both experienced teachers in grey and early career teachers in blue. And what you see is that across the efficacy scales of overall effective practice, and then the subscales of classroom management, instructional strategies, and student engagement, we see really significant improvement in all of those measures for both experienced and early career teachers. So while this project was originally set up to support early career teachers, and it is, what we're finding is it has just as much benefit for the experienced teachers who are involved in the study. And here's another case with an early career teacher, Chelsea, saying, like, I just like the fact that we could have experienced teachers in with the beginning teachers. It felt like it was nice that I could observe someone and give them feedback, that it wasn't just the usual one-way street of me getting feedback. So again, we think this intergenerational learning component is really important. In terms of teacher wellbeing, what you see here is, particularly for our early career teachers, a reduction in reported levels of burnout and increases for both in shared vision, trust and respect, and teacher wellbeing. And what I love about these graphs is just that we are seeing those really same results for both groups of teachers. With all the interviews that we're doing, we're also finding improved or enhanced knowledge, refined practice, stronger relationships, and teachers who do rounds, they tend to maintain that ongoing collaboration. Like, even though they only do the 4 days together, they're 4 pretty intense days. And what we find is that teachers still connect with each other in really quite deep professional ways. And also that improved sense of well-being. So just positive after positive. And, we're, as researchers, always having to look for counter evidence, the negative case, and we're just not finding them with this study. That was the heading, sorry. So again, just one more quote from another early career teacher: to have QTR in your early career, to have people go, that was actually a really positive thing you did. It just builds your confidence. I think we're pretty hard on ourselves as teachers. We always feel like we're failing our kids. But I don't know, there's a single teacher walking around going, I'm the best, there's nothing I do that's wrong. I think we're just hardwired that way. And I think many of us can relate to this, and especially teaching's, you have new kids every year. You have so much change every year, new syllabuses, new assessment processes, new behaviour contracts, whatever it is. It's not an enterprise that we perfect. It's a destination we keep moving towards, and the destination, if you like, keeps moving. Just so you're aware, we've had now more than 1,020 almost teachers from 267 schools in every state and territory participate in this study. We'd love to get a few more from anywhere really, but particularly some of those states that have had less. We're about to start a big project in Tasmania, where we have all of the leads for the state coming into a workshop. So just terrific to see that broad reach, I guess. And what I wanted to highlight is that we have fewer than 500 places remaining in the study. And that means that you can get that access to the free professional development for groups of 4 teachers, so long as each group has 2 early career teachers in it. So we would love you to avail yourselves of that opportunity before it runs out. I think it's running out the end of term 1, 27, or term 2, 27. Kate, do you know?
I'm not sure if there's specifics. Sure. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but I think if you want to get involved in the study or bring another group to the study, we'd really encourage you to start setting that up probably for term 1 next year, and term 2 will be the last opportunity where you can do it without any cost to yourselves, apart from the cost of releasing teachers to participate in the rounds. The whole project is due to finish around mid-2027. So yes, the comment here is we expect most of these free places to go this year. We've seen a real boost, I guess, if you like, in uptake since the start of this year. So ideally, you would jump on board in 2026, and that's the EOI form that's available at that QR code. If you do want to get in touch with anyone, there are all these different modes. I personally like to pick up the phone. So there's the phone number, 0249215053. I feel like I'm selling something now. But you might like to reach out to our project manager, Tarina Vale, who can also talk you through things.
QT Academy, empowering teachers to empower each other.